Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batter's Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batter's Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batter's Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Talkapolis, the social media TV network for your city.
And welcome back, everybody, to Pit Pass. Joe Williams and Larry Woody as we wrap up a couple of extra notes on Bristol before we go to California. Larry, visually, the crowd was not what I think they'd hoped for.
Well, it's the eternal question, Joe. Was the track half empty or half full? Are you an optimist or a pessimist? I thought it was half, for better or worse, about half full. It seats supposedly 160,000. The crowd for the Cup race Sunday was kind of scattered out all around the track, so it was kind of deceptive if you took them and squeezed the crowd together. Maybe 80,000, about half full. Now, having said that, most pro sports would give their eye teeth to get 80,000 people turning out. It's almost like NASCAR, and Bristol's is a victim of its own success. They drew those monster crowds for so long that when they start dropping off a little, what would be a good crowd for most sports is kind of half full for Bristol. But again, kind of disappointing. And on the Saturday nationwide race, Joe, it was really bad, judging from, I was home watching on television, and that's the fewest fans I've seen in the Bristol stands since they expanded to 160,000 seats. It was abysmal. Sunday race better, but again, about half full. I don't know what the problem is, but whatever it is, it hasn't been completely solved yet.
Two thoughts of mine on that. Number one, Larry McReynolds said 2 or 3 years ago when we all started looking at crowds and going, they stink. It's not the crowds stink, it's just that NASCAR facilities were overbuilt. There were too many seats. If you had 100,000 seats, it'd look good, but you got 160, so you got to fill those too. Secondly, as far as the nationwide race, I got to be honest, and this is a personal opinion, but I fear for the nationwide series, Larry. I feel for all series in NASCAR except for the Cup, because 5 or 6 years ago, there seemed to be a very conscious decision in Daytona that we're going to put all our eggs in this one basket, and these other baskets over here can catch a couple as they fall. The Truck Series may be the best pure racing on a national quote major league level. But you don't get to see much of it. No,
that's the trouble. I don't think there's any question. The Cup Series is the most competitive week after week, but only it's not week after week. They run one and wait 3 weeks and maybe run another, and by the time they run another Cup race, you can't remember what the point standings are, who's leading, who the good drivers are. You've lost all those storylines that you need, the continuity to keep that fan interest. So again, the Truck Series suffers from that. And your point on the nationwide series struggles, Joe, we don't have to look any farther than here in our backyard at the Super Speedway in Gladeville to see what happened there. Dover tried to live on Cup races, on nationwide races and truck races, and couldn't do it. The fans just wouldn't turn out large enough numbers to support the nationwide series here. So, and Gary Baker, our friend Gary Baker, he and Mike Curb tried to field a team in the nationwide series, and if Gary Baker and Mike Curb can't make a go of it with their almost 50, 60 years of expertise in the sport and the market and everything, if they can't do it, I don't know how anybody can do it. But you're right, the second tier series is in trouble, and if NASCAR doesn't crank the Truck Series up and start getting more races around, it'll be in trouble.
Well, it just scares me a little bit for both of them.
And you hate it because there's so much potential there, so many good storylines. And NASCAR, to its credit, tried to do some things. They made the Cup full-timers ineligible for the nationwide title.
Points,
double-edged sword. The fans like to see the Cup guys in the nationwide races. As you know, when you call the races out at the Super Speedway, when they would introduce that handful of Cup drivers that came out there to the interlopers, the double dippers as they call them, they would get the biggest ovations of anybody. The fans love to see the Cup guys. The downside is, as Gary Baker would tell you, the Cup guys come in and we're winning all the races and taking away all the prize money. So it's a tough decision, and I'm sure NASCAR is wrestling with it as we speak.
Well, we've talked before about how do you fix it. I think the move to no points was a good start. Maybe it's time to set a purse where if you don't get points, you only get half the purse, and you distribute it on down from there, and give these regular guys some extra money. I don't know. The biggest thing is, you were talking about the consistency in the Truck Series and in the Nationwide Series, the musical racing seats. Yeah. You know, we would have a lot that would, especially late out at the Super Speedway, we'd have a nationwide race come in, and there would be 4 or 5 TBAs. Yep. Here's a team owner who's entered a car,
to be announced.
But under driver, it's TBA, to be announced. And it's almost like, well, we're just waiting to see who's going to bring most money.
And the other thing, speaking of money, Gary Baker said that's part of the problem. Sponsors have so much influence, particularly on that level, that they kind of dictate to the nationwide team owners what driver they want in the seat, and most of them opt for the Cup guys. You know, they like to see Greg Biffle driving Gary Baker's nationwide car because Biffle's one of the Cup superstars. And so it's kind of tough to develop those young drivers for a team when the sponsors are paying the bills. If they got a choice between a Greg Biffle and Joe Blow, they say put Biffle in the seat. Sure. So again, it's tough to develop the young guys if they can't get in the cars. Another one of those nationwide quandaries, and I'm not smart enough to figure it out, and I don't believe NASCAR has. Well, obviously NASCAR hadn't figured it out
either.
Neither is Dover Motorsports, you know, that built this beautiful racetrack in Gladeville, and it kind of fell flat on its face. You know, even people who've done business in NASCAR for 40 years or so, they're sitting around scratching their collective heads trying to figure out what exactly the problem is, and when they figure that out, how to fix it.
So I think it's an issue. There's just not an easy answer.
There's not.
Easy answer, though, on the schedule is we go to California this week, Larry. California, a sister track to Michigan. Roger Penske recovered a brownfield. Did a great environmental thing to create what is now the Auto Club Speedway. They still have the naming rights. But it is an exact copy almost of Michigan, which I've seen very few.
You're trying to think of a nice way to say this, aren't you?
Yeah, you know what I'm getting ready to say.
It's California's a 2-mile track.
A snoozer.
Fairly level, low banked. And historically, the racing hadn't been that good. Drivers have so many places to go and hide out there. They can get out, get the field strung out, just ride around most of the day and log laps, which from the driver's standpoint might be the smart thing to do. From a spectator standpoint, we might as well go out on Briley Parkway and watch the afternoon rush hour because there's usually more action. But having said that, now we're sitting here complaining about what a boring race it's going to be Sunday in California. They'll come out and have maybe the most dramatic race we've ever seen. It's hard to call these things, but you're right. Historically, those big tracks like 2 miles, flat tracks, they're just not conducive to old-fashioned stock car racing.
Let me get off track of where I was headed here for a second. Just throw something at you because you're talking about maybe they'll go have an exciting race. Is it possible that it's time to shorten these Cup races? You get the early start where everybody's jammed up together. And from about the 10%, 20% mark to the 90% mark, 70% of the race, all anybody wants to do is maintain.
They're just riding.
And riding.
Yep.
Is it possible we need to cut the distance on these things?
Well, you know, Joe, NASCAR already has cut some of them.
Right.
We've seen some of the 500 lappers, or milers going to 400 miles. The problem is TV, because television doesn't want to lose an hour of programming because that's another hour of sponsorships they can sell and make a whole lot of money to pay Darrell and Larry and Mike and
NASCAR.
And NASCAR. NASCAR gets to make sure
NASCAR get good money.
They get their slice of that juicy pie. So that's the drawback to shortening races. You also cut your telecast, radio and TV telecast, and you reduce your sponsorship dollars, which maybe, you know, we're talking millions and millions over the course of the season. So that's the drawback to that. But I've found a good way around that, Joe. I turn the race on at home, watch the start, the first 10 or 15 laps, read a good book, and then start watching the last 15 or 20 laps. And I'll keep the TV on. If I hear Darrell start yelling, I'll look up and see what's going on.
But you know, that's the scary part. I think those of us who watch at home have gotten to that point.
Yeah, you kind of snooze or read or do something else. And it's almost amusing sometimes, Joe, with the telecast when you see the cameras frantically searching back through the field, maybe to find 2 cars running close together for 28th position, and they'll put the camera on them because the 27 cars ahead of them are strung out running single file, and they're frantically trying to find some kind of action. And the other day at Bristol, a couple of cars brushed against each other, and the TV guys kept replaying. Oh man, that was close. Did you see that? Man, they almost got together there. In the old days, if you could find a lap when two cars didn't get together, that was unusual. But now, I guess you take your action where you can find it.
California, the fourth race of the year, will be the fourth different type of racetrack. You had the 2.5-mile superspeedway at Daytona. You went from there to Phoenix, which is a mile and a quarter, or so, mile and a half, mile, whatever. Kind of a strange little layout. Then this week they were at the High Bank Short Track of Bristol.
Had Vegas in between.
Had Vegas in between the standard mile and a half. So this will be the fifth race of the year. But 5 races, 5 different types of racetracks.
Yeah, this will be the 5th different kind of track that they've raced on in 5 races. And these are professional drivers and mechanics, veteran teams, all that. I never thought, Joe, the adjusting should be that. The adjustment should be that hard. You think about golf pros; they have to play 18 holes, and they're all different. And every hole you have to, one's a par 3, and the next was a par 5, and water and sand and dog legs and everything. About making adjustments is what it's supposed to be about. And let's hope they don't ever go to running 36 races on tracks that are all the same, because
we're pretty close. Wait a minute.
We think it's boring now.
We're pretty close to that now with the mile and a halfers.
The mile and a halfers are.
Yeah. We're already there.
Yeah, those are the same.
We've lost Rockingham. We've lost another race at the second race, I guess, at Darlington with the funny egg shape. The track, North Wilkesboro tracks with character and history, and replace them with laser guided GPS setups that make them almost the same.
Yeah, generic tracks make for generic racing. It's that simple.
With generic cars.
Yeah. And generic drivers, if NASCAR keeps hammering away at them. But having said that, overall, it's still, I don't want to be too pessimistic about racing. I think NASCAR has done a lot of good things. You start with the safety innovations. You really got to applaud them for that. Sometimes I think they over-legislate. Well, a lot of times they over-legislate. But overall, the health, the sport's not too bad a shape, because again we're complaining about the lack of attendance last week at a race that drew about 80,000 people, and again that's a sellout for most NFL football teams, and hockey teams would give their grandmothers false teeth to get a crowd like that, and Major League Baseball and any other any other pro sport would kill for a crowd like we're complaining about the one that turned out at Bristol last week.
That's scary.
It's not that bad.
And the other half is it's been a pretty good season already. Been pretty competitive. You've had a bunch of different winners.
Good storylines.
Good storylines. Where it goes from here, obviously, is left to be seen. We've gone a little bit further than we should have in segment number 2. We're going to come back with a short segment 3, but first I got to tell you about our friends at All in Cooper CPAs. Tax time is literally around the corner. Boys and girls, you're 3 weeks or less than 3 weeks away from having to settle up with your favorite uncle. Don't get caught, don't get in trouble. And the smart move is to go ahead and get these folks online to help you all year long. And then at the end of the year, when this happens, you're kind of like me, you just go, okay, and sign your name and figure out, is it good or bad or how bad? But that's All in Cooper CPAs. We'll come back and wrap up Pit Pass right after this.